Welcome to Creamer Media's Polity. I'm Amy Witherden. With me in the studio is Poppie Mphuthing of the Institute for Security Studies to discuss how South African citizens seem to have gone too far in exercising their right to safety and security. In a paper entitled Fear and Loathing of the Rich Infringe on South African Civil Liberties, Ms. Mphuthing states that while individuals have the right to protect themselves, it seems unreasonable that these rights have been so far extended as to advocate the privatization of public space. Poppie, what are the municipal and legal implications of the trends in security estates and enclosed suburbs?
Well, in the first kind of general instance, obviously when you block off whole neighborhoods, you just have a traffic issue. Urban design, cityscape has been designed in a specific way. And when you cut off huge chunks, it's a huge problem. Now, apart from the kind of inconvenience of traffic, you'll also have more seriously emergency vehicles. As we know, maps are not necessarily updated regularly, and you know, if you're called out an emergency and there's a fire, somebody's in need of an ambulance, and you end up in a kind of cul-de-sac that you didn't know existed, that's obviously a problem for the civil liberties of whomever's in trouble.
You imply in your paper that the need to protect oneself has gone too far by infringing on the rights to freedom of others. Why do you say this?
As we know, in our country, it's become, security is a big issue, and it's reasonable. We have very high crime levels. But the issue is really that with public space belongs to everybody. So if one chooses to buy a property, rent a property in a townhouse complex or a security village, then of course that's entirely your right to do so. However, it's a problem if you know, we kind of lop off huge amounts of public space. And you'll also find an issue where, say I've purchased a property in an open neighborhood and years down the line now it becomes enclosed. Now obviously there has to be community buy-in, but occasionally it's not 100% community buy-in when you enclose these areas, which can cause friction now within those areas. And some communities erect these booms without any legal justification for doing so. And it's a big mission now to undo that issue. And so obviously it's quite a degree of conflict going on.
Okay. Would they have to get permission to put up booms, that kind of thing? You
absolutely have to have permission to do that. And there's different types of blockage, if you like, that you can have. You're not actually in public spaces supposed to have a situation whereby you prohibit people coming through. There can be a kind of control point and a checkpoint idea, but often the barrier in itself is inhibiting to people on the outside, which already becomes an exclusive and almost unreasonable taking over of public space.
Are urban security measures and their associated attitudes of fear and loathing not justified in light of the problem of crime in South Africa?
Look, I think all citizens in this country are concerned about crime, in particular violent crime, you know, your robberies, your murder, and that's quite reasonable. We do in this country have an unacceptably high rate of crime. It has been dropping, but still, particularly in international comparisons, we have a very high crime rate. But a big problem is that people fail to understand, I think, that to be safer isn't necessarily to increase security, which is a difficult concept to get to grips with. But you know, how many more barbed wire fences can you kind of put around your home? How many more electric fences? It provides an us and them situation, and eventually them will get at us. Now, if we don't all become a community together, then safety is probably not going to actually get any better. It's more important to build communities, to interact, which means actually breaking down walls and barriers, as opposed to keep erecting more.
Okay. So is it possible to balance these seemingly opposing rights of freedom and security then?
Well, it's a difficult one because it's obviously a catch-22, isn't it? If I drop my barriers, take down my electric fence and get robbed kind of the next week, then it's quite problematic. So what we actually do need, and hopefully the new Department of Human Settlements, and I think they, you know, are along that track, is how to build communities and to build trust. Now, you're going to always have incidences of crime which are going to affect people, and when you've been personally affected, obviously it's more difficult to be objective. But community building really is the key. In the past dispensation of apartheid, we had hamlets and blocking people off. It didn't really help much, and it seems that there's still a similar mindset that prevails, and that's not going to carry the country very far forward. It's certainly not going to increase our feelings of safety and security.
That's true. Thank you, Poppie. That was Poppie Mphuthing of the Institute for Security Studies on the fortification of the city and how it affects the civil liberties of other South Africans.